Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/WTech. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washington Tech Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washington Tech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
President Obama addresses gun control technology, EFF accuses T-Mobile of throttling, and New York City Council member Ben Kallos joins me today. In his speech announcing his executive order to improve gun control, President Obama noted the need to improve gun safety technology, including fingerprinting technology, to unlock guns. The Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies noted in an infographic citing CDC data last week that Black Americans die in gun deaths at a rate that is over 20 times higher than that of whites and nearly 6 times the rate of Latinos. Obama said, quote, "If a child can't open a bottle of aspirin, we should make sure that they can't pull a trigger on a gun." End quote. You'll recall that back in 2014, a 9-year-old killed her shooting instruction with an Uzi. At the time, the Washington Post noted that no one knows exactly how many gun deaths are caused by minors, but listed numerous instances in which accidental gun deaths caused by children were reported in the news. The Electronic Frontier Foundation wrote in a blog post last week that T-Mobile's Binge On feature is really a throttling mechanism in disguise. Throttling video would, of course, violate the FCC's net neutrality rules. T-Mobile's Binge On program is a so-called zero rating program in which T-Mobile allows customers to access some video services such as Netflix, HBO, and Watch ESPN without fear of it affecting their data caps. In exchange for the privilege of being zero rated, these services agree to allow T-Mobile to what it calls optimize video down to a 480 progressive scan, which is fine for most mobile devices. However, in a Slate post, First Amendment lawyer Marvin Amori wrote that T-Mobile is actually doing this optimizing thing to all video when Binge On is enabled. So EFF conducted a test to prove Amori's assertion and concluded it is true. So EFF is asking the FCC to look into it. Chanel Hardy has left the Federal Communications Commission, according to various reports, including The Hill, and John Egerton over at Broadcasting and Cable. Hardy had been serving as Chief of Staff to Commissioner Mignon Clyburn for less than a year. She joined last May. Egerton wrote that multiple sources say Hardy will be joining Google. He also noted that there have been other rumors that Commissioner Clyburn may be interested in running for Congress. There's speculation that Clyburn may want to run for her father, James Clyburn's seat. Congressman Clyburn is a Democrat who serves South Carolina's 6th congressional district, which he has served since 1992. Holly Sorer, who is currently serving in the Media Bureau, will take up Chief of Staff duties within the Commissioner's office on a temporary basis. The patent troll watchdog Unified Patents released a report showing patent trolls, companies that make money by licensing patents rather than selling products the patents cover, brought most of the 5,760 patent lawsuits which were filed in 2015. This is the second highest rate of patent suits brought in a single year. Lumosity, the company that promises to train your brain to be more agile and prevent cognitive decline, will be paying a $2 million settlement to the Federal Trade Commission because it preyed on consumers who were worried about cognitive decline. The company could not substantiate that its popular games had any effect to protect the brain, particularly against dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Lumosity said the deceptive practices in question were part of an older marketing campaign and that the deceptive language is no longer included in its marketing materials. Lumosity has more than 70 million users. The Federal Trade Commission released a report on the effect of big data on inclusion of and discrimination against underserved communities. The report seeks to encourage companies to balance their use of big data without sacrificing civil rights compliance or preventing underserved groups from accessing information their data have not made them privy to, but from which they would benefit. You can find the report at ftc.gov. 181,000. That's the number of recreational drones Americans have registered at the Federal Aviation Administration. FAA Administrator Michael Huerta announced this at last week's Consumer Electronics Show. Finally, the FCC has announced its January agenda. The agency will consider the Broadband Progress Report, the public inspection file for cable and satellite, and a rulemaking on emergency alerts, which the Commission is trying to make more accessible and inclusive of state and local governments. The open meeting will be taking place at the FCC on January 28th. Stay with us. For you, the listeners of the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a 30-day free trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You'll be amazed at how much time Audible will save you. Why not listen at the gym, in the car, or on your morning run? How about Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness by Richard B. Thaler and Cass B. Sunstein. You can download Nudge or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at audibletrial.com/WTech. My distinguished guest today is New York City Council member Benjamin J. Kallos. Kallos represents District 5 in the city of New York, Roosevelt Island, and the Upper East Side. Kallos has spent his entire political career fighting for New Yorkers. As a member of the New York Democratic Lawyers Council, he rose to the position of Statewide Coordination Committee Chair, organizing and managing over 4,000 attorneys and 350 law students to protect New Yorkers' ability to vote in the most recent presidential elections. Kallos also created the votersearch.org program to help protect the right to vote for over 12 million New Yorkers when he learned that some 2 million voters had been removed from the voter rolls. As a member of Community Board 8, he rose to the position of co-chair for the Communications Committee, implementing open source technology to reduce waste and save the city thousands, publicizing the open application process and opportunities to become a public member. Kallos attended SUNY Albany, where he served on the student, faculty, and university governments and boards. Kallos paid his own way through the University of Buffalo Law School, the State University of New York's only law school. During law school, Kallos fought to protect working-class seniors who had seen their life savings and retirements lost. Kallos became increasingly involved in public service as an editor of the Buffalo Public Interest Law Journal and interned with the Honorable Renee Fergency Manaric in the New York State Court of Claims, a regional office of United States Senator Charles Schumer and the New York State Attorney General's Internet Bureau. All of these experiences instilled in him a passion for public service. Councilmember Kallos from the city of New York. Benjamin Kallos, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me, and hello to all the Washington Tech listeners out there.
Great. So we're here today to talk about some of your open government initiatives, specifically the Free Law Founders Program. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Free Law Founders Program?
Free Law Founders is for legislators, executives, and members in government, as well as members of nonprofits and advocates out there who are interested in setting their law and with it their government free. I'm a free and open source software developer, and a precondition to all of it is having access to the code. And somewhere between Hammurabi and today, a lot got better, but a lot got lost, and now we no longer have access to the laws that we're governed by. And so Free Law Founders are a coalition of the legislators and nonprofits and executives in government and around government seeking to set our law free, as well as the legislation, the budgets, and really just the transparency that we need to be seeing in government so that it can belong to the people once again.
So tell us about how Free Law Founders started. What was kind of the impetus for that?
I had just gotten elected, and we were working together as council members and council members-elect on drafting rules reforms. And one of the rules reforms that was really important to me was the legislation of the city council. I had previously been a chief of staff in the assembly, and in 2009, you couldn't see how elected officials voted in their state legislature. And so once I left the legislature as a staff person, the first thing I did was turn around and foil that using the Freedom of Information law, put it online and made it freely available, and then gave that source code over to folks at the Sunlight Foundation who launched Open States, where actually one of my partners ended up being one of their lead developers. And so once I came into office, I thought we should be doing the same sort of thing in the city council. And we were using a software program, and it was not allowing us to have an open API that would allow people to build the types of tools that we see on the federal level, like Open Congress, which I'm a huge fan of. That was originally done by Participatory Politics Foundation, David Moore. So I just wanted to have those same access to democracy for the city of New York.
And so what is the key problem that Free Law Founders is trying to solve?
We got started and spent a lot of time thinking about principles for open law and open legislation, and making sure that people had access to complete, timely, machine-readable laws, legal codes, legislation, without restrictions, paywalls, fee, or what we see in the private sector with LexisNexis and Westlaw of copyright by license or user agreement, making sure people could download, share, annotate, reuse legal data in a non-proprietary open format that's licensed and copyright free, but also protects it from entering into that, and ultimately make sure that people can participate in the lawmaking and rule-making processes, and really just empowering people to freely engage in the democratic process. So that means helping people engage with legislation and codification, whether it's legislators, legislatures, or individuals or advocates, helping to make the data useful, and making sure that the information that we're working with is actually helpful, useful, and meaningful.
So tell us about some of the victories you've had so far with Free Law Founders. So
I was able to convene Free Law Founders with Mark Farrell, a supervisor over in San Francisco, who is working on the same items. Susanna Mendoza, the city clerk over in Chicago. Seamus Kraft, at Open Gov Foundation, as well as Daza Greenwood at MIT, who actually hosted our inaugural meeting, along with Jonathan Askin, who is a professor at Brooklyn Law School and advised the transition committees on technology for folks like President Barack Obama. So we had an illustrious group of people together, and we all said, you know what, we want our vendor, Granicus, to make our legislation open using an open API. And San Francisco, New York City, and Chicago were all clients, and as a result, we've been able to see, at least with Chicago and other jurisdictions, Granicus rolling out an open API, and we're hoping to announce that shortly in the City Council, where we have amazing rules reforms. We've just launched labs.council.nyc.gov, where folks can see some of the things that our City Council is doing. And actually, it's labs.council.nyc for that URL. Additionally, we passed a law co-authored by one of my colleagues that I was lead sponsor for to set the law free in New York. That's gone out to contract, and I am hoping we're going to have something great to announce there. New York City already has a somewhat transparent budget, but we're working on making it more so. We've also put something called the City Record online, which will allow people to get notices about government meetings in a computer-readable format, and that's actually online now.
So now, Ben, you've had a tremendous career as a public servant, actually working for the people. It's very uncommon to see anymore, particularly with our Congress on the federal level that just can't seem to get anything done. But what was sort of the impetus for you when you decided to really focus on communities and make sure that the work that you do has a positive impact and make sure that the work that others are trying to do, such as real estate developers, really take into consideration the impact that their projects are going to have on the community?
I believe in a citizen legislature, and I am a citizen myself. I remember not too long ago when I was just a member of the public who wanted to have their voice heard and believed that my voice had as much validity as any other voice in the crowd. And since then, I've just been dedicated to making sure that I remember where I came from, remember who I work for, and remember that their voice is the most important. And I want a government where it is open, transparent, and where there's accountability. And now that I'm in office, I've actually found that accountability needs to run both ways. So just for an example, most people, they meet a politician, they go to the politician, and they say, I want you to do something. And the person either says yes or no, and then either does it or not, in most cases not. And what I've been trying to do is change that experience. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I'd like you to do something, I'm able to say, well, the reason I'm already doing it is because of this, or the reason I'm not doing it is because of that, or in the alternative, the reason I can't do it is because I don't have the resources, but if you're interested in stepping up and working with us and building a community, my website, my office are all yours to use to organize. And so it's a beautiful experiment we call democracy, and trying to see what happens when you empower people to have a real role in the process.
And New York City actually has some open law and open legislation pending. What's the status of that?
So the open law has passed, and an RFP, a request for proposals, was issued. The first RFP wasn't very well written and would have continued the status quo, so I got a copy of it, rewrote it, and we sent it out again. That actually put a preference out for people who would actually have an open law system, and we're hoping to announce shortly that it did end up going to folks who are committed to open law. In terms of the open legislation, that also passed, and we are still trying to work with our vendor to put out an open API that would make our legislation easy for folks to access. And in the meantime, I'm working closely with OpenGov Foundation on a product called Madison, as well as with Participatory Politics Foundation, which has already launched Councilmatic for NYC. And I've actually even provided funding to that organization, and now anyone can go online and interact. And I think one key place is trying to move forward with working with the community around legal XML, legal rule ML, and open notification standards around the city record online that has also happened. One of the bigger issues is communities often feel like they don't know when they can comment or how to interact with government. And we're all putting out these public notices, whether it's in the federal record or in a city record or another record. The way we put you on notice is we put it in this incredibly boring document that says things in legal jargon that nobody understands, and that's something I'm trying to fix.
So now you'd think that it'd be sort of a no-brainer to get a bill like that passed. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the political challenges that you had, if any, getting the bill passed or getting these bills passed?
The biggest challenge to transparency tends to be that people are afraid of what will be uncovered. Generally, additional challenges are the people responsible for implementing the changes, as well as the vendors responsible for being involved in those changes. Oftentimes, you may have a city, state, or federal employee who's been there for 30 years. And the saying goes, no one's ever been fired for hiring IBM. The saying also goes that if you are put in a position where it's easier to say no than yes, you're going to stick with no. So trying to get buy-in from the people who are responsible for implementing, that those on the executive implementation side will have to work with, it's important to make sure that they understand that they can do it, and having positive test cases to point to it. San Francisco or Chicago is incredibly important. Government by its very nature is risk-averse. And then similarly, when you're doing things that impact vendors, oftentimes the vendors will push back, whether it's through lobbying or just a refusal to do the work for which they're being paid.
And what about folks who say, I'm just trying to pay the bills, I'm just trying to pay the rent, put food on the table. The way bills have passed in the past, that's just been fine with me. I'm going to vote in the election, and that's pretty much the extent of my involvement. What do you think is kind of the value proposition for folks who aren't really used to having this level of engagement with their political process?
I will take the person who says they will vote. In New York State and New York City, we have some of the lowest turnout in the country. We are ranked in the bottom 3 routinely. So we don't even have people turning out. In the last mayoral election, I believe we were at 25% turnout. We had 1 million people vote out of 4 million registered voters out of a city of 8.4 million. So, sorry, that's even lower than 25%. That is dismal. So first piece is, how do we get those people to vote? And that's a big question in a country that seems to be averse to mandatory voting, which some other jurisdictions have. So we're trying to figure out, how do we create a better democracy where people not only want to vote, which is a problem here in New York City, but want to engage in a political process that they feel is fruitful. In New York City, we're also experimenting with a direct democracy project called Participatory Budgeting, where I'm literally giving away $1 million for communities to decide how to spend on community improvements. That can be public schools or parks or public housing or transportation improvements. And in our last cycle, we actually had 2 schools that each win $500,000, and that is more money than most of the PTAs have ever raised in quite some time. And so in that way, we're hoping that people get used to voting and participating in a way that is meaningful and produces direct results that you can touch, such as a new school improvement. But hopefully the goal is, honestly, where we're trying to head is, most people don't really care and don't want to have to be bothered with government. They just want government that works. You turn on the water in the morning, and that's government working because it's your water utility, but you don't want to hear about it. You just want it to work. And I think that's where I'm trying to take government. But along those same lines, you care about your backyard. You care about what's happening on your block. So with the combination of the open legislation, the open law, and the city record online, and perhaps help from listeners from your podcast, we are able to perhaps work together so that there could be an app for that, so that you could actually get notified about the things you care about in the vicinity you care about, and have a meaningful way of participating easily.
So, Councilman Kallos, what are you overall fired up about in New York right now? What is kind of the climate there, particularly around underserved communities? What's kind of keeping you up at night? What are you working on? What are you most passionate about when it comes to serving New Yorkers?
We have an amazing place and time here in the city of New York. I'm vice chair for our Progressive Caucus, which is Empower in our legislative body. We have a progressive mayor. So we spend most of our time not fighting about policy decisions, but more on the lines of implementation, which is a great place to be, and we have a unique opportunity. One of the items that I've been focused on greatly is really trying to make government more seamless and make it work, and helping more people. And along those lines, there's a lot of people going hungry every day. We're talking about hundreds of thousands in the city of New York and millions across the United States. And we could be using the taxes that we pay every 2 weeks or every week, or even your W-2 or 1099 form, or even when you file taxes in April, to give people the benefits they need without them needing to apply for them separately, because that's just government waste. So if you file and you need a food stamps card, an EBT card, SNAP, just send it to the person in the mail. If they need a Social Security benefit, just get it to them. If they just had a new dependent claimed on their form, give them the women, infant, and children's benefit, and just make it easy for people so that government's just helping people and not being bureaucratic. Amazon is a really big company, so are Facebook and others, but to the consumer, it's one place to point and click and everything just works, and that's the way government should be.
So what's coming down the pike in New York City in terms of tech projects and particularly opportunities for folks to improve their skills so they can find higher paying jobs in the workforce?
Code is the new literacy, and the City of New York has a new commitment to teaching code to children in our public schools, and hopefully that will go a long way towards empowering our kids for the jobs of the future. We also have Workforce One programs here in the city where we're able to connect people with the training that they need to enter the workforce. One of the larger problems that we're seeing here in the city and also nationwide is a digital divide. And with the Comcast-Time Warner merger, which was ultimately defeated, one of the things that I was hoping to get out of that was an end to that digital divide by providing anyone who was low income and federally eligible for Lifeline to have access to universal broadband at similarly low costs. And with Charter stepping into the place of Comcast in certain jurisdictions, I think we have another opportunity to really bridge that digital divide so that people actually have the access they need to use the information superhighway and the world's knowledge that's contained therein.
So, Councilman Kallos, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining me. I have a few more questions, if you don't mind. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So my first question is, and guests who come on this podcast are very successful in their fields. We have, you're actually our first elected official, so congratulations or welcome, whatever's appropriate. But we've also had folks who lead think tanks. We've had entrepreneurs on the show, and I always ask them what are some of their productivity hacks. They can be apps that they use, habits that you have. What are some of the things that keep you on top of your game?
I subscribe to Getting Things Done, and we actually use Trello to manage my office. In my 2 years in office, we've already gone through over 7,700 Trello cards with a team of about 6 or 7.
Wow.
And we currently are working on about 2,000 Trello cards at any given time. And what that means is when something pops into our head or something that we need to work on, that becomes a Trello card, and we're able to make sure that it gets taken care of and it never falls through the cracks. So that is one huge piece. Another piece is delegation and empowerment. So every single person on my team don't have time to micromanage, but what I do have time to do is make sure that they're all trained to make decisions as if they were me 9 out of 10 times, and then to bring it up for review, if necessary, 1 out of 10 times, and they're able to do that with senior staff who are then able to make a decision as if they were me 9 out of 10 times and only bring me that 1 out of 10 that might be an issue. And in so doing, you're actually training people to make the same types of decisions, you're training them to be better managers, and you're creating an organization that can think together, work together, and get more done. Also, big fan of Google Calendar and using multiple calendars to manage things. As an elected official, generally we're trying to be in any given place multiple times. Tonight alone, I have 10 different events that I've been invited to at once. So having something like 8 different calendar and overlays is helpful for managing my time.
And what is one book that you read recently that you feel compelled to recommend to basically everyone you meet?
Anyone in the government sector should be paying attention to behavioral science. It's a huge new area, specifically behavioral economics. And if you haven't read Cass Sunstein's book, Nudge, you should. And it's very well written, and it comes with 20-plus ideas for improving government as well as your own life is important.
Sounds good. And you've been listening to New York City Council member Benjamin J. Kallos. Councilman Kallos, are there any final ideas you'd like to leave with the audience?
The government belongs to you. Take it back.
Thanks so much. And can you tell folks where they can reach you and where they can follow you on social media?
Your listeners can find me on social media at Ben Kallos, which goes for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even GitHub.
That concludes episode 21 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. I cannot do any of this without you, so thank you. If you're new to the podcast, or even if you've been listening for a while, I have a free cheat sheet for all of my new email subscribers, and you can find the sign up for that at washingtech.com/cheat sheet. And that cheat sheet is a guide for you to get up to speed on various different policy areas, including cybersecurity, intellectual property, net neutrality, and other areas. It's a quick reference anytime you're planning for a meeting or writing something you need citations for. That's washingtech.com/cheat sheet. Thanks again to all of you for listening. I will see you back here next week. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.